How private are the contents of your phone or your computer in the context of search and seizure? My name is Brian L. Jackson. I'm a Tulsa attorney. Today I want to talk about a particular scenario that comes up occasionally at the airport and some other places, and that maybe it comes up during even a traffic stop. And that is law enforcement requesting or demanding access to your electronic devices, phones, laptops, tablets, things like that. What are your rights? Well, that depends on the context. As a starting point, the seminal rule for searches and seizures comes under a case called Katz. And the Katz rule essentially stands for the premise that if you have an expectation of privacy in a particular location, communication, a particular, your personality, your house, your car, then that is considered a search for the Fourth Amendment purposes, and generally speaking, the police will have to establish probable cause and obtain a lawful search warrant. So that's your starting point. So then the next question would go is, well, do you have a reasonable expectation in the contents of your phone, your tablet, your computer? Well, a short answer to that is that the case law seems to stand for the idea that you do. So if the police want to see the contents of your phone, they either need your permission, which you should never give them, or they need a warrant, or it has to be a situation that comes under an exception to the usual Fourth Amendment search and seizure rules. So the first one of those elements should never be in place, because you should never, ever consent to a search of your device by law enforcement. I would say the same rule that I've given earlier about automobiles also applies here. How certain are you that there is nothing whatsoever on that device, whatever it is, that could potentially be seen as suspicious, that could get you arrested? How many other people have had access to it? Are you absolutely sure it hasn't been compromised by a virus? And the answer, I think, for most of us is you don't know. You may think you know, you probably don't. So the safest course of action in that situation is you don't consent. Because if you consent and they find something, it's coming into court, and you will be responsible for it. So your best course of action is never consent. Now, if they have a warrant, you could be required to turn the device over. But what happens if the device is encrypted? A lot of these modern devices are. iPhones encrypt automatically if you set a password. Same thing with a Apple iPad. Although laptops don't, if they're running Windows, don't decrypt by default. A lot of folks set their computers up to where the portions of the hard disk or maybe the entire system are encrypted. So then the next question becomes, if they do have a warrant, if they do lawfully seize your device, do you have to divulge the password? And this is a complicated question. I would suggest you probably do not have to divulge a password if it's not already written down, because essentially what they're doing is commanding you to pull something out of your head that isn't yet in existence and present it to them. And there is case law that suggests that you are not obliged to participate and assist in your own prosecution. So it would be my opinion you probably do not need to share that information. However, if you find yourself in this situation, it is really important you talk to a lawyer, because it would be important to know the very specifics of the situation. Now, where it's different is if you're talking about a device that can be unlocked biometrically. And going back to my example of the iPhone, it's encrypted if you set a password. But if you set up your biometrics features, which a lot of people do, the police could take that phone, wave it in front of your face, unlock it without your consent. And if they already had a warrant to get into the phone, that's perfectly permissible. There's no Fifth Amendment violation there. So, number one, don't have stuff on your phone if you can help it that you shouldn't. Although, again, I go back to my point, is how much do you really know about the complete contents of the device? Number two, if you have anything sensitive on your device, and I'm not necessarily saying illegal kind of sensitive, but sensitive. If you work in certain professions, you might have information on your device that you don't want law enforcement getting into. Like, for example, in my profession, I have particular devices I use that I handle client communications on from time to time. I might also have other materials on there that are covered by attorney-client privilege. I certainly would not want law enforcement pawing through those materials, both for my sake, but also for the client's sake. So I'm very cautious to make sure that things are secured with a password that is not written down and that is known only to me. That's a subject to discuss. It's a little bit beyond the scope here, but suffice it to say, I would say probably they can't make you divulge a password, but they can make you cooperate if they otherwise have an appropriate warrant in unlocking a device, if it's biometrically unlockable. Third situation is if you are passing through a security checkpoint, like at the airport, or if you're passing through customs. There are situations where TSA or Customs and Border Patrol, and it's usually the latter, have asked people to unlock devices and so that they can empty the contents. And the law seems to have taken the position, the courts seems to have taken the position that this is not a violation of the Fourth Amendment, that they can do that without probable cause and without a warrant. What's the takeaway? Well, if you know you're going to travel and you're going to pass through one of these checkpoints, either don't have anything on that device, take a separate device that you know that you can be fairly well assured doesn't have anything on it, like a burner phone, or be prepared to unlock it, or be prepared for the consequences if you don't unlock it. And that could mean you're detained. So be aware of that. This is mostly happening at ports of entry, and it is something that it has been on the news, and the courts have taken the position that does not implicate the Fourth Amendment. So be careful what you have on your devices when you go international, which you should anyway, because I'm only confining my discussion to U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. You go into another country, their customs service can search you too, and you don't have the same protections traveling in another country that you would in the United States. And the consequences for being caught with something could be considerably more severe, and something that could be 100% legal here could be contraband going there. So if you have any questions about any of this, and I know I've covered a lot, this is kind of a long video, I would encourage you, give me a shout. My number is 918-585-1107. Again, my name is Brian Jackson. I'm a Tulsa attorney, and if you have questions about Oklahoma law or about the topics that I've talked about here, give me a call. If I don't know the answer, I'm happy to look it up. Thanks.